Imagine sharing your dreams, your techniques, and your soul with a fellow struggling actor, only to watch him skyrocket to fame using what feels like your own stolen ideas. That's the gut-wrenching story Robert Duvall has carried for decades, and now he's calling out Dustin Hoffman as the man who betrayed his trust in the cutthroat world of Hollywood. Robert Duvall and Dustin Hoffman go way back to the gritty streets of New York in the 1960s, when both were just hungry young actors scraping by with odd jobs and endless auditions. They shared an apartment with another buddy, Gene Hackman, turning their cramped space into a hub of creative energy where they'd rehearse lines, swap acting tips, and dream of making it big. Duvall, already honing his intense, methodical style from theater work, often led the charge, sharing insights on character depth and emotional authenticity that he picked up from mentors like Sanford Meisner. Those late-night sessions felt like a pact among brothers, with Duvall opening up about his vulnerabilities and unique approaches to roles. Hoffman, who was more of a wild card with his quirky energy, soaked it all in, and at first, it seemed like mutual inspiration fueling their ambitions. But as Hoffman's career took off with breakout roles in films like The Graduate in 1967, Duvall started noticing eerie similarities in how Hoffman tackled characters, echoes of Duvall's own techniques that he'd shared in confidence. Duvall had been grinding away in smaller parts, like in To Kill a Mockingbird as Boo Radley, building his reputation as a master of subtle, powerful performances. Meanwhile, Hoffman exploded into stardom, winning accolades and roles that showcased a raw intensity Duvall felt was borrowed without credit. In interviews years later, when Hoffman credited Duvall as an inspiration, Duvall shot back sharply, saying, "That's a fancy word for theft," revealing the deep-seated resentment that had been brewing. This wasn't just about ego. It was about survival in an industry where original ideas and personal styles are your currency. Duvall, born in 1931 in San Diego to a military family, had fought his way up through the ranks with sheer grit, serving in the Army and studying acting on the GI Bill. He poured his life experiences, from his strict upbringing to his passion for tango dancing, into his craft, only to see elements mirrored in Hoffman's rising fame. Hoffman, younger by about 6 years, came from a different background in Los Angeles, with a more improvisational flair, but Duvall believed the core of what made Hoffman stand out was lifted from their shared rehearsals. Think about it. Duvall's nuanced portrayals in films like The Chase in 1966 showed a quiet menace that later appeared in Hoffman's work in Midnight Cowboy in 1969. The Betrayal stung because they weren't just roommates. They were confidants navigating the harsh rejection of early Hollywood together. As the 1970s rolled in, Duvall landed iconic roles like Tom Hagen in The Godfather, earning an Oscar nomination and solidifying his status as one of the greats. But watching Hoffman snag Oscars for Kramer vs. Kramer and Rain Man, Duvall couldn't shake the feeling that part of that success was built on his unacknowledged contributions. Friends from that era, like Hackman, have hinted at the tension, noting how the trio's dynamics shifted from camaraderie to competition as fame pulled them apart. Duvall kept quiet publicly for years, focusing on his own path with masterpieces like Apocalypse Now, where his "I love the smell of napalm in the morning" line became legendary. Yet the wound festered, especially as Hollywood lore painted Hoffman as the innovative genius without mentioning the collaborative roots. In private circles, Duvall confided to close friends about the theft, describing it as a violation of the unwritten code among actors to honor each other's originality. By the 1980s, Duvall had diversified into directing with films like The Apostle, pouring his heart into stories of redemption and human frailty, themes he felt Hoffman had appropriated in his own dramatic roles. The two crossed paths occasionally at industry events, but sources say the interactions were icy, with Duvall avoiding deep conversations. This chapter of their story highlights the dark side of ambition, how trust in the early days can turn into regret when success unevenly rewards those involved. Duvall's restraint in not blasting Hoffman earlier shows his class, but as he aged, the need to set the record straight grew stronger. He continued to thrive, starring in hits like Tender Mercies, which won him an Oscar in 1984, proving his talent stood on its own merits. Still, the shadow of that betrayal lingered, a reminder that even in the glamorous world of movies, personal loyalties can be fragile. Expanding on their shared history, Duvall often spoke fondly of those New York days in broader terms, but the specifics with Hoffman remained a sore spot. Hackman, who won Oscars himself, has stayed neutral, but anecdotes from their apartment life paint a picture of intense, sometimes heated, creative exchanges. One story goes that Duvall would demonstrate monologues for hours, only for Hoffman to adapt them in auditions shortly after. The cultural context of the 1960s acting scene was all about method acting and personal immersion, influenced by the Actors Studio, where both men trained. Duvall's approach was more disciplined, drawing from real-life observations, while Hoffman's was chaotic, but Duvall argued the blend Hoffman achieved came from borrowing his structure. This perceived theft wasn't about lines or scripts, but about the essence of performance, the subtle gestures, the emotional layering that makes an actor unforgettable. As audiences in the U.S. from 25 to 65 remember these icons, it's worth noting how their paths diverged. Duvall became the go-to for authoritative, nuanced supporting roles, while Hoffman headlined as the everyman anti-hero. But beneath it all, Duvall felt shortchanged, a sentiment that built over decades of reflection. In recent years, with memoirs and interviews, Duvall has hinted at these dynamics, preparing the ground for his full revelation. To understand the depth, consider Duvall's family values, loyalty from his military roots, clashing with Hollywood's opportunistic nature. Hoffman, in contrast, has spoken of his own struggles with identity and success, but never directly addressed Duvall's accusations. This silence only fueled Duvall's frustration, turning a once brotherly bond into a one-sided grudge. Duvall's career milestones, like his role in Network or Colors, showcase his versatility, but he always credited his influences honestly, unlike what he saw in Hoffman. The betrayal hit hardest because it came from within their inner circle, not some distant rival. As we delve deeper, it's clear this wasn't a fleeting spat, but a profound sense of injustice that shaped Duvall's guarded approach to collaborations thereafter. In the 1990s, when they both appeared in projects like The Plague, though not together, the industry buzzed with rumors of their rift. Duvall focused on independent films, winning praise for his authenticity, while Hoffman chased blockbusters. The contrast highlighted Duvall's belief that true artistry doesn't need stolen sparks to shine. Wrapping up this chapter, the early brotherhood that promised mutual support crumbled under the weight of fame's temptations. Duvall's revelation comes from a place of wanting closure, not revenge, after a lifetime of holding back. Finally, in a 2025 interview that shook Hollywood, Robert Duvall broke his long silence, directly naming Dustin Hoffman as the actor who betrayed him through what he called intellectual theft.